for me in high school, I mean, I was just frightened of conducting myself in a dating relationship. And so I never worried about I might have sex with some girl. I knew that wasn't gonna happen. But even the physical relationship, it was kind of like high school was kind of like a reset for me. The few girls that I dated right at the beginning, I was just so in my own head, like I couldn't kiss them. I got dumped because I didn't want to kiss a girl who really wanted to kiss me. I did eventually dabble in physical relationship with, I guess, a couple of girls I dated, and it was a cycle of, is this okay? Do I feel guilty? I'm just gonna confess to God anyway. But it wasn't, I still had so much trepidation that it overrode most of my drive. I got in a serious relationship my senior year of high school, and that's when, I mean, it's like we were in love with each other and it was really serious and it was going really well. And then within the safety of that relationship, our physical relationship progressed. And it progressed further and further. And of course we were in the band, we were preaching from stage. We would talk as a band when we get together and rehearse. We would have like basically accountability. And if you're not from the evangelical movement, you hear that word and you know what it means, but it means something more specific within our world. It's more systematic, and it involves saying, like you say what you need help with, and then you basically, when you get together with your accountability partners, then they'll ask you questions. You've given them permission to ask you questions about it, to hold you accountable that you're keeping your commitments. You better not. So I have to think, well, I don't know if we talked about masturbation in those meetings. I don't think we did.
I don't think we were comfortable enough.
But we talked about, like, I'm struggling in my relationship with my girlfriend. Like, I wanna make sure that, like, I'm honoring God. And we were just so serious, and we had put ourselves out there that, like, if we were hypocritical, then it might ruin someone's chances of coming to Jesus. We were very serious about it. And I brought that into this very serious dating relationship. But we were making out and trying to just stop it at that. So my line was at the collarbone.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's where my line.
You should have asked me where the line could be.
That's where my line was, and
the line has a tendency to move down, I will say that.
I remember we were having conversations, but you had girlfriends earlier, and then the well kind of dried up for you. Like by senior year, you weren't dating anybody, right?
Not senior year.
And
junior year, yeah, but not senior year.
I remember we would hang out in the Walmart parking lot, and we would talk about the hypocrisy that's on the line. We would encourage each other to be chaste. And you were like, man, I think you would talk about your line, and you would tell me about some of the things that you had done, and then we would encourage each other not to do those things. And then within the band, we were trying to do that too, because the band was kind of on the line in this. If I screw up literally with my girlfriend, does the band fall apart? And does my relationship with God fall apart?
One thing I will say about us is that we have always been, and I actually think this is the thing that drove our deconstruction. We have always been pretty concerned about truth and integrity. Like, it is something that has, the idea of saying this and doing something that was different and not representative of that thing was something that we couldn't really live with. So it wasn't just this sort of pressure of the culture that we were in, because listen, there were lots of Christian kids who were part of that same culture and were like, guys, you literally take this seriously? I'm screwing my girlfriend. I mean, of course I know I'm not supposed to, but I'm not gonna not do it. But we were like, oh, no, you can't do that thing because it's wrong and you're not supposed to do it, and it would ruin your witness if you were to do it. And I think I'm proud of us in that way.
Yeah.
Because I think that we took it very seriously. It was the framework that we had committed to, and it came with consequences, and it came with standards that you were supposed to follow, you know?
And at certain points they felt impossible. I mean, and so there were times when if you're making out with your girlfriend, when I was making out with my girlfriend, it would get, your
collarbone gets old.
Your body kind of takes over because your body is telling you what it wants, and you can find yourself doing things that it's almost like an out of body experience, especially when it is such an existential crisis. Like I was making out with my girlfriend and I was having this internal conflict, and I felt like it was Satan versus the Holy Spirit. And it was, don't do this. The cycle of shame with masturbation would happen in our relationship whenever we would cross a line. But we were so infatuated with each other that we would make rules.
Keep doing it.
We would, like, we're not gonna touch each other, and then it's like, it was just hard to keep your hands off of each other.
Sometimes they don't, setting that boundary and drawing those lines, it's human nature to then go and cross the lines.
So on a physical level, it was a complete struggle and so frustrating, but on a spiritual level, it was just as much anguish, definitely more, because every night after I was hanging out with my girlfriend, it would just be like, all right, I've got to confess and make these promises to God and to myself. And it got to, our relationship continued through my freshman year in college. So every weekend, we'd make sure we spent time together. And it was just, I look back on it and I just feel so sorry for us, because it became this obsession. Like we were motivated to connect, but yet, and we had all these struggles, and we would slip up and we'd go too far, and then I would be like, I'm not only sinning against my own body and God, but I feel like I should be stronger, and I should now I'm dragging her down too. Because every time I did something, it put up that wall of separation with God, that then I had to have a conversation with him in order to tear it down. And after a while, it's like, God has to be getting tired of this. I'm freaking tired of this.
That'll smite you.
I also think when you're just making out, and we could do it for hours, and it would be so much tension and struggle. And then the other way I look back and I'm sorry for us is that, like, if we'd have just gotten it over with, we probably could have had a much more vibrant relationship, but it actually began to completely define our relationship, because it was, I wanna be with you, I wanna enjoy you relationally, not just physically, but the desire is so strong, and and the rules we put in place just, it was torture. It was a form of torture.
Well, the interesting thing, again, kind of looking at this from a strictly biological standpoint, if you think about what is actually happening, you're doing something that the two human bodies are not really, have not adapted to do, which is to just live in this foreplay place just indefinitely, right? Which is where the whole I kiss dating goodbye thing came about, which we got more into in college, where it's just like, don't even do anything physical, because, and that was a Christian application, was you're basically just sitting there with the end of this burnt fuse, just lighting it, and it's getting super old, and it's not even that fun anymore. And it feels like all the focus of your relationship is on not letting the fuse burn down to the bomb and blow up, right? But it's just interesting to think about it in a secular context now, to be like, you got these two sexually mature people who have all the equipment and all the hormones in order to then move towards a procreative act, who believe that they shouldn't do that, but are kind of just starting in this place that naturally leads to sex, but they don't go there because of this other philosophical framework. What is that? I mean, that's a hellish place to be, ultimately, is what I'm saying.
It definitely was. And then, so at a certain point, it became, this struggle became such a cornerstone of our relationship that I began to believe that it was creating an insurmountable barrier. Like, I couldn't confess at a rapid enough rate to keep that wall between me and God down, and I assumed that I was doing the same for her, or that, again, there was consent, she was on the same page, so she was having a similar experience. That defined our relationship to the point where we broke up just because we couldn't handle that anymore. And you know what it did? It absolutely broke my heart, because we broke up because we were so into each other that we were doing things that were dismantling our relationships with God. It wasn't about anything that happened between us otherwise. And I probably spiritualized it at the time and said, well, if I can't be someone who keeps my standards and my boundaries and also does my part to keep her pure as well, then I don't need to be in this. I don't need to do this to her, and I don't need to do this to God. And that's the reason why we broke up. It's really tough it's like when it felt like you're really in love with somebody that you think maybe you want to spend the rest of your life with them, but then it's like, okay, they move away and you don't, and so you break up for some tertiary reason.
Yeah, but you didn't actually have you didn't have a normal breakup process of like realizing that you weren't right for each other, or there was some insurmountable conflict. It was like a sort of emotionally stunted process because of this other factor.
It consumed our relationship and just like a wildfire. I just feel like it burned us to a crisp. And so we broke up, and that was probably and I've said this before, I feel like that's the most prolonged experience of depression that I've had in my life, except for parts of COVID and lockdown. And so you can see that entire experience going into my sophomore year, and then like we broke up at the beginning of the summer before sophomore year, and then the first half of sophomore year was like this depression. And then I met Christy.